Welcome back, traveller. Tonight we're slipping behind the beak mask and walking straight into smoke-thick alleys. Vinegar tang in the air, where plague Dr. Capes creaked and bubonic plague medicine meant orderly chaos, quiet courage, and rules that breathe. You'll feel the cane tap on stone, the candle steady in a draught, and the weight of choices no one wanted. Because lasting a single day in this job wasn't grit. It was choreography. If you vibe with strange, soothing history told for sleepy minds, gently tap like and subscribe. Now do the cozy ritual. Turn the lights off, settle in, and close your eyes. Let the city exhale around you. And drop a quick comment. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? You wake before the bells because fear keeps earlier hours than faith, my friend. The room smells of vinegar, smoke, and old leather that learned to keep secrets. You tighten the waxed cloak until it creaks like a discreet warning not to breathe. Gloves, boots, hood, layered like arguments against an invisible, impolite assassin. Tonight you're a plague doctor, but right now you're a person choosing to disappear. And yes, that choice is the first lesson in survival you won't like. The contract lies on the table, fat with promises and small print wearing knives. Hazard pay sounds glorious until you read the clause about no liability for acts of God. Towns hire you because fear is expensive and hope needs an official hat. You sign with a hand that already smells faintly of rosemary and regret. Outside, the watchman coughs in syllables you can't afford to translate. You tuck the coin advance near your chest because panic warms poorly. Let's talk uniform, because performance saves lives even when medicine cannot. The mask is theatre with a thesis, glass eyes, black beak, reputation longer than your arm. You pack the beak with rue lavender, myrrh, mint, and a little bravado for luck. They call it bubonic plague medicine. Really, it's aromatherapy strapped to a prayer. Still, the herbs teach your breath to behave and your mind to slow its noise. Smell becomes a shield when truth won't. Leather gown, waxed to a dull sermon, turns droplets into bored tourists. Boots meet cobbles like judges, firm, unseduced, ready to overrule puddles with opinions. The hood narrows your world to 2 circles of glass and a long, private hallway. Your cane is distance measured in wood. Stand back without starting a war about it. Underneath, a linen shift drinks sweat that would rather be a river. Every layer is a sentence that says, "Not today if we can help it." You step out, and the city exhales the way a sick room does, quiet, heavy, personal. Windows shutter from inside, doors whisper, even cats choose diplomacy over argument. A cart rolls by, canvas pulled wheels, narrating a story older than your courage. Your turn. You learn to walk like punctuation, slow enough to be legible, quick enough to matter. Children stare because the beak looks like a joke their parents forgot to laugh at. You tilt the mask a little, a nod that tastes like mercy. At the first house, a ribbon on the door plays judge and jury, black for loss, red for warning. A mother's voice breaks the lock quicker than your key ever could. Inside, stale air, boiled herbs, and a heat that believes in suffering as policy. Your lens fogs. You learn to wait, to let breath and sight renegotiate terms. Diagnosis begins before you touch anything. Looking is a tool, not politeness. You speak low, because voices can bruise. Open the beak just a breath. Let the mint argue with the room. You watch the armpit swell, tight, angry crown of heat with a black mood. You note pulse like a drummer, counting the distance to dawn. Boil a cloth, cool it, press it, like a promise that won't lie to them. Is it cure? No, it's kindness that packs a small sword. In playtime, kindness is the only currency that doesn't inflate. You mix your posset. Wine warmed with spices and desperate arithmetic. A thimble for thirst, not a river. Drowning the fever drowns the hope. Leeches. Leech? Not today. You're not negotiating with ghosts when the living still answer. Purge or bleed only when the story demands a new paragraph, not a new book. Remember, much of bubonic plague medicine is preventing panic from doing worse harm. So you steady hands that don't belong to you. First theirs, then yours. You write a talisman, yes, but not on paper, on routine, the oldest magic. Air the room, fire the bedstraw, boil cloth like it owes taxes. Separate the healthy from the hopeful. Hope is contagious in both directions. You mark the door with symbols neighbours will obey without understanding. A clean bucket gets knighted, a dirty one meets exile. Log it all, because memory gets dramatic when it's tired. Between houses you rinse the cane with vinegar that thinks it's a saint. You burn a pinch of rue, not for demons but for discipline, that smells brave. The street performs a ballet of avoidance. 5 paces, eyes down, prayer up. Your shadow looks longer than you are. Good. Fear needs taller stories than facts. A bell tolls somewhere. The city keeps roll call of the absent. You walk faster without admitting you did. Every appointment teaches you which lies are kindness and which are theft. You will rest is fair. You will live is an interest rate you can pay. You learn to leave silences where hope can sit without debt. A father asks if the mask means safety. You say it means effort. Truth that isn't cruel becomes a tool. Cruelty that thinks it's truth breaks hands. You keep your voice under the thunder of your own thoughts. By dusk the beak smells like a garden that lost an argument with a battlefield. You remove it slowly, the way you peel grief away from a day that tried. Hands in vinegar, then cool air, then stillness long enough to hear your heart. You count coins without joy, because money doesn't learn names. Age in your ledger lists, who might see sunrise and who might not. You close the book like a door you promise to reopen. Night, you lean against a wall that holds up tired men and beaked myths. The room tastes of smoke and something sweet that refuses to apologize. You sharpen the quill, trim the wick, and trim your fear a little too. Tomorrow we'll ask for the same performance, the same imperfect miracles. You'll answer, because answering is what keeps you human inside the costume. And when the bell calls again, the city will hand you the next door and a harder lesson. You start by diagnosing the streets, not just the bodies. City as patient, breathing badly. According to miasma theory, corruption of the air slinks through cramped alleys like fog. You move slow, counting drafts and odors. The vinegar tang versus the sweet rot of gutters. A plague doctor treats wind like water, redirecting currents with doors, shutters and distance. Your cane taps stone, measure, mark, and makes space before panic erases geometry. If the air is the suspect, then ritual becomes your bubonic plague medicine. At the gate, watchman and a parish beadle enforce a quarantine cordon drawn in ink and fear. You check writs of protection fee negotiation, murmured behind a beak mask that muffles breath. Pockmarks bloom on lintels, crosses, dates, initials, so parish records can keep grim arithmetic. A bell at each doorway signals status to neighbours who already know too much. You write names that feel heavy, then fold the page so hope can still breathe. Order buys time. Time buys a chance to be useful. You carry beliefs like tools, and tools like beliefs. Practical, if imperfect companions. Galenic medicine whispers, balance the humours. Experience replies, balance the house first. Bad air gets challenged by contagion logic. So you split the difference like a diplomat. Windows open to lift vapours, bedding bakes in sun, like shame learning manners. You place the sick apart without declaring them exiles. Language matters, even to the air. In plague work, theory is a lantern. Routine is the road. Inside a sick room you stage the air, fumigation first, then conversation. A brazier glows. Aromatic burners hum with juniper, rosemary, and a scrap of bay. You waft smoke baths through corners where despair tends to collect interest. The leather cloak creaks wax-sealed seams catching sparks that die in their sleep. You set a vinegar sponge by the bed, a modest moat against breath that wanders. The room's temperature lowers, so does everyone's heartbeat. Treatment is a choreography of small mercies with policy-safe names. Cordials, theriac, and electuary, a thin rose water, arrive in thimbled doses, not oceans. Otis calls a plaster, dressing seals, and a salve tells skin to remember patience. You mention cupping softly. You let bloodletting stay a footnote unless fever begs. Drained swellings are discussed as weather reports, not epics. Privacy is part of care. You teach sips, sleep, and stillness like they're rare herbs. Between houses your kit talks back in familiar sounds and smells. Crystal eye lenses fog, then clear. Gloves tighten. Boots translate cobbles into policy. The cane, your examination stick, measures distance when words might fail. Oil-rubbed garments remember yesterday's rain and today's resolve. You do tuck herbal sachets, rue wormwood angelica, into the beak's long hypothesis. Breathing becomes a ritual. Ritual becomes focus. Focus becomes kindness. Institutions turn fear into hallways you can actually walk. The lazaretto waits beyond the river, an island of rules in a sea of rumour. A pest house near the isolation ward receives those who need watchful silence. You admire Venetian quarantine from a distance. 40 days measured with maritime patience. City gates inspection sorts travellers by story, luggage, and cough that argues too loudly. Not mercy or cruelty, just gates that buy the living another morning. Timby, markets require a different mask. Calm louder than price, science softer than scold. You ask vendors to thin the crowd, to move stalls where wind has better ethics. Refuse lease gutters for pits. Churchyards learn to accept more, with euphemistic dignity. Candles and prayers gather under a curfew that cools streets into monastic quiet. You bless soap without saying soap. You praise distance without saying fear. Leadership is a tone before it is a rule. Paperwork is your second spine when your first one bends. You copy mortality rolls cleanly, so later minds can rescue patterns from grief. One for fevers, another for skin blotches, a margin note for delirium's poetry. Where rat runs cross flea-ridden bedding, you circle the block in red patience. Records don't heal, but they feed the strategy that will. You close the ledger gently, the way you'd close a tired eye. Rituals keep the city from breaking where it already hurts. Last rites by a shuttered window. Processions reduced to candles at thresholds. You stand aside so priests can pass, then return to rearrange air and beds. Neighbors trade rumors. You trade routines. Both of you traded exhaustion for resolve. A widow asks if the smoke helps. You say it helps people help themselves. Sometimes that answer is the medicine. Evenings are for recalibrating your courage without making it perform. You clean the beak mask with a cloth that smells like vinegar tang and stubborn roses. You pick cloves from the beak's beak. Replace lavender. Argue with sage about tomorrow. Your wide brim hat hangs like a moon that forgot to rise. Breath muffles inside the beak during practice. You rehearse until fear loses rhythm. Resolve returns in small, measurable breaths. Before sleep, you walk one last circuit under a tired sky that still keeps time. Bells at doorways count, and the cane tap on stone answers. Present, present, present. You note which alleys hold smoke-thick air, and which whisper healthy draughts. Somewhere a quarantine cordon breathes. You're the lungs tonight. The city isn't cured, but it's coached. That matters. And tomorrow you'll open a door that refuses to open back. Welcome to the pest house, where rules meet heartbreak, and you decide who gets a bed. You reach the lazaretto at dawn, fog stitched with bell notes and watchmen's, hard whispers. Torches gutter, revealing chalk marks, writs of protection, and faces rehearsing courage poorly. The gate smells of vinegar, juniper smoke, and the quiet arithmetic of fear. As a plague doctor, you present your seal. They present a queue of complicated stories. Leather creaks. The cane taps policy into stone. 6 paces between breaths and rumours. Inside, the pest house exhales like a tired cathedral learning to pray for air. Intake begins with distance, questions, and eyes that have learnt a way without wounding. Name, parish, onset of fever. Which rooms held miasma theory more tightly than windows? Your crystal eye lenses. Fog, clear fog again. Patience wipes them cleaner than cloth. You scent bad air. Note skin blotches, count chills like beads slipping through fingers. Cloth dipped in rose water seals the pulse, a modest kindness before decisions. Some will stay. Others enter quarantine cordons that circle the city like hesitant arms. Triage is medicine's courtroom, and the verdict pays in beds, not speeches. You choose by fever height, breath sourness, the size and temper of swelling nodes. Elders with steady pulses outrank youths with delirium and storms in their eyes. Mothers nursing infants become law. Sailors with coughs that argue receive observation. This is where bubonic plague medicine means logistics, bed frames, straw ticks, and hours. You hate the power, keep it anyway, and write reasons the ledger might forgive. The ward is a city in miniature. Curtains as streets, pallets as stubborn addresses. Windows, once ashamed, are ordered open. Shutters learn to speak the language of drafts. Aromatic burners breathe wormwood, rosemary, and bay into corners where despair thickens. Wax-sealed seams on your cloak shrug sparks. The brazier glows like a small moon. You reposition beds, downwind of breath, and upwind of hope's fragile lungs. Airflow becomes your quiet ally, moving like a careful, unpaid nurse. Routines turn panic into tasks mortals can finish before sleep notices. Sip schedule, whey, then thin posset, then barley broth warmed by a patient flame. Cool cloths rotated with clockwork. Herbal sachets tucked under pillows like polite guards. You whisper instructions, because whispers carry further here than thunderous certainty. Silence is treatment, so is light, so is folding blankets the same deliberate way. Order hums, pulses follow. The room downgrades its emergencies by degrees. Procedures are named with softness, performed with steadier hands than yesterday. Where buboes threaten bursting drain swellings are guided to kinder outcomes without theatre. Poultices soothe heat, plaster dressings seal privacy, salves remind skin to remember patience. You mention cupping, in passing keep bloodletting, as a rumour unless fever petitions. Cordials, theriac, careful electuaries, arrive as thimble allies, not oceans of hope. Your cane becomes an examination stick, not a wand. The magic is monotony. Staff appear like constellations resolving from smoke. Barber surgeons, lay sisters, beadles with ledgers. Parish beadle counts candles and hours. A nun counts breaths between prayers. Chain of duty threads from matron to door guard, everything labelled in plain Latin. Curfew locks the ward at dusk. Quarantine logic locks the mind to discipline. In this chorus, your beak is just one instrument. The music is routine. Authority here is quieter than fear and louder than rumour, on purpose. Cleanliness is argued, then enforced without shaming the exhausted to straw, ticks burned on schedule. Linen spoiled until they confess their secrets. Buckets wear titles, clean, dirty, retired, because nouns save lives at scale. You rinse the beak mask with vinegar. The leather cloak drinks oil against tomorrow. Gloves rotate like soldiers. Boots get scrubbed of refuse in gutters trying to revisit. Distance is dignity. Hygiene is mercy. Both become daily, unfancy miracles. Social weather shifts faster than any fever chart can predict. A rumour blames strangers. You redirect it toward chores. Nobody argued for yet. Candles and last rites at thresholds keep grief from breaking the hinge. You pass notes to priests through shutters and letters home through sympathetic beadles. Coins for hazard pay get tucked away without applause. Fear doesn't tip well. Still a widow smiles when you praise her broom. Courage disguised as bristles. Records keep faith when memory becomes dramatic and unhelpful. Columns for fever, weakness and delirium. Margins for addresses and rat sightings. A red circle on the map where rat runs cross. Flea-ridden bedding twice. You chart days since market visits, churchyards and city gate inspections. Patterns emerge, less poetry, more policy, and the ward feels smarter. Tomorrow's plan hides here, between ink lines steadier than sleep. Night rounds are candlelight stitched to habit. Your shadow looks competent on purpose. Muffled breath inside the beak merges with the hush of prayers. You don't interrupt. You shift a patient's pillow, swap a dressing, reset a brazier's stubborn mood. A watchman nods. The cane tap on stone answers. 2 slow notes of assurance. Back in the anteroom you breathe lavender once, then get back up again. Resolve is a muscle. You feed it with small victories and warm water. Morning is triage's echo, some improved, some unchanged, some beds respectfully made. You escort the convalescent to sunlit benches. Teach them how to sit with oxygen. For the lost you fold sheets like flags and let the bell speak instead. Outside carts wait with gentleness that learned its lesson yesterday. You're not finished. The city still breathes badly and markets will open. Shall we step outside next, into inspection lines, bribes, and the uneasy theatre of city gates deciding who may pass? At first light, you walk the road to the gate, where fear wears uniforms. Watchmen warm hands over braziers. Smoke climbs and hangs like cautious drapery. Lines already form. Merchants, pilgrims, porters, stories stacked deeper than their carts. Your cane taps the stones in a rhythm that says rules before mercy. Inside the beak mask, your breath fogs settles and agrees to behave. Today, the city itself is your patient, and the exam begins at its throat. The quarantine cordon isn't just a rope, it's a bargain with breath. Markers in lime chalk draw a pale circle no rumour may cross. You read the wind first, because miasma theory and common sense both love angles. If air drifts inward from markets, you widen space and narrow hope. If it drifts outward to fields, you borrow the breeze as unpaid staff. Your job is to teach air which direction to prefer. Paperwork flexes before muscle, does writs of protection, seals, and wary signatures. You hold each pass to the light, listening for lies that paper whispers. Names must match faces. Faces must match coughs that refuse to be quiet. You note origins, recent nights, and who sleeps near whom, with candour. No shouting. The voice of a clerk can calm a crowd faster than drums. Every stamp buys hours. hours by options you actually want. Examination is small theatre with honest props. Hat off, palms shown, questions precise. You look for fever weakness, and that tired glaze fear can't fake twice. A cloth with vinegar, time touches a wrist like a polite detective. When doubt lingers, you escort to the side bench. Shade, water, and more questions. Those who pass move in pairs to shorten gossip's half-life. Those who don't meet the lazaretto with dignity, you schedule not dread. Bribes arrived, disguised as compliments. Rare cloth, sweet figs, coins that smell ambitious. You decline with ritual kindness, because taking one breaks 10 invisible beams. A gate that bends for gold collapses for panic by noon. Instead, you trade in courtesies, directions to a safer roadside, a cleaner inn. Your cane becomes punctuation, not a cudgel, emphasis, not insult. Power kept quiet, travels farther than power, performing. Carts get their own interview, wheels included. Canvas up, canvas down. No surprises between sacks and stories. You stir grain with the examination stick, watching for uninvited scurry. Bales sniff of wormwood, juniper, or damp. Each scent writes a paragraph. A herbal sachet, tucked near edges, is both ritual and rodent memo. Thunder. Your nod sends them to a yard where fumigation sings in low smoke. Travellers heading out meet the world by your permission, not their impatience. You advise pauses at fresh air, night stops where drafts are honest. A vinegar sponge for the road, a note for a parish beadle ahead. If they boast of speed, you prescribe slowness like a cordial. Bubonic plague medicine isn't just bottles. It's timing, spacing, and boring habits. Boring habits, you remind them, are what hero stories are built on. Ambassadors and couriers wear urgency like perfume, loud, confident, persuasive. You admire the seal, then test the breath behind it with equal ceremony. Messages cross. Microbes shouldn't, so you stage their waiting rooms with dignity. A chair in shade, a jug in sun, a clock you actually trust. Venetian quarantine taught the world that time can be a wall with windows. You borrow the lesson, 40 days scaled to your city's size. Some hours the gate becomes a chapel of logistics and thin mercy. A mother with infants, a mason with bread, a widow who won't unclench. You sort not by worth but by risk, and speak the difference gently. Today you shelter, tomorrow you pass. Lands softer than refusal. When tears appear, you let silence finish your sentence without breaking it. Crowd learns the cadence and breathes with you instead of against you. Merchants adapt quickly when profit learns patience. Stalls slide outward, tents rotate to favour wind with better ethics. You chalk lanes between tables so shoppers walk poetry, not tangle. A bell at midday asks everyone to wash, not pray about washing. Prices grumble. Tempers try headlines. Your tone picks a quieter font. Commerce lives. Rumour relocates. The city exhales a little straighter. Afternoons bring the theatre. Nobody advertises, refusing entry. You point to the pest house, with a map and an apology rehearsed until true. Escorts walk beside. Not behind, so dignity doesn't feel arrested. You send notes ahead, age symptoms kin, so the ward can lay out gentleness. Crowd eyes soften when refusal looks like care instead of verdict. Even the watchmen stand taller when reasons arrive before orders. At dusk, you close the books, not the heart. Columns tally travellers' detentions, carts steamed under junipers steady him. You circle hot spots on parchment, the colour of old caution. Leather creaks as you ease the cloak. The beak mask cools on a peg. Tonight you'll rewrite procedures into something kinder and stricter at once. And tomorrow gates will open again, while inside the walls you enter the markets where rumour trades faster than grain and your cane has to outwalk 1,000 tongues. You step into the market and it hits you first as weather. Warm bread steam mixing with stable funk, garlic breath arguing with fish, and that faint vinegar tang you've taught everyone to recognise as calm. Your cane taps out commas on stone. People part, not out of fear of the plague doctor, but because you've made space feel like safety. Stalls jostle like boats at low tide. You read the air before the prices, the wind before the words, and you begin. Start with lanes, because lanes are mercy. You chalk thin corridors between figs and onions, letting drafts run like little rivers that lift bad air away, instead of trapping it under canvas. Vendors grumble until you praise their stall as a model for others. Ego is a cheap disinfectant. You rotate tents so smoke doesn't sulk under awnings, and you move meat toward the edge where sun and breeze have better ethics. Hygiene speaks softly. Geometry carries it. Now you treat rumour like smoke. Don't swat waft. A whisper blames strangers. Another blames the moon. A third blames last week's fish. You let each pass through your beak mask unchallenged, then replace them with a story about drafts, clean hands, and distance that sounds older than fear. Buboes chase crowds, not individuals, you say, and people scatter themselves into safer shapes. Bubonic plague medicine. Here is choreography. 3 steps back, 1 step sideways, then bargains as usual. Smell is your barometer, and your sermon. When the air grows sweet, sour, and heavy, you widen the lanes. When it sharpens to pepper and wood smoke, you relax a hair. You hang small herbal sachets, rue and rosemary, where cues not to enchant the disease, but to teach breath to behave. Your wide brim hat shades your lenses. Your leather cloak creaks a warning to every elbow that wanders too close. People don't need lectures, they need cues. Water is the cheapest miracle and the most suspicious guest. You station barrels near stall ends, with a vinegar sponge floating like a quiet threat to grime. A bell rings at the half hour. Everyone rinses, not because you said so, but because the bell is easier to obey than your face. You reward the neatest stall with 2 words. Good practice. And the market copies excellence faster than it copies fear. Control spreads by compliment. Known to God. Now the money talk performed as mercy rather than audit. You check weights with calm fingers and a small nod that says fairness will outlast panic. Fee negotiation for your time happens in whispers, never in show. Hazard pay is a mute handshake, not a parade. You stamp a travelling peddler's writ, and with the same motion, stamp his pride back into place. When commerce feels seen, it cooperates. When it feels hunted, it hides data you need. Children are your best messengers, so you deputize them with jobs that sound like games. Count the chalk lines, you say. Find the stall with the straightest buckets. They return with intel and sticky hands. You pay them in dates and praise. Mothers relax when work looks like play. Fathers listen when you admire a rope knot on a tent. Public health sneaks in behind compliments like a polite guest who brings bread. There's a drama in the corner, someone coughing like a drum. The crowd's gaze sharpens, and you arrive with a pace that says theatre is closed. Hat off, palms open, questions, crisp. You escort the man to the shade, prop him with a folded cloak, and measure the pulse as if you had all day. When breath steadies, you hand him rose water and a breadcrumb schedule. Sips now, sleep later. Ward if fever climbs. Crisis melts when tasks appear. Fumigation without panic looks like cooking. You set a small aromatic burner behind the fishmonger. Let juniper and bay drift like seasoning. No smoke parade, no incense ceremony. Just a background hymn that keeps air from sulking. A cane lifts a canvas flap. A draft strolls through. Everyone pretends nothing happened while everything improves. The beak mask makes people brave enough to copy you. Your quiet makes them wise enough to keep doing it. Records matter, even here, where voices drown ink. You note buyers who cough stalls that shine, and hours when air goes heavy. A red dot for crowded corners, a green slash for lanes that stayed lanes. You're building a market map. The city will thank you for later, even if today it argues with onions. Patterns turn rumour into scheduling, and scheduling turns fear into something that can't sprint. Midday you make the market breathe. A curfew of appetite, 10 minutes of shutters half closed, a collective sip and wash. People laugh at the novelty, then love the quiet. Bread is cheaper when buyers aren't shouting. Fish looks fresher when the air is less dramatic. You hear the cane tap on stone as a pulse. Regular, ordinary, almost bored. When order feels boring, you're winning. As dusk leans in, you leave the market tuned like an instrument that will play itself until morning. Lanes marked water, set smoke polite, rumour redirected toward chores. You nod to the beadle, to the nun buying onions on behalf of 3 beds, to the boy who can now tie a knot. The wind respects. The city exhales a shade cleaner. And tomorrow, you'll follow the carts to the churchyards, where candles outnumber coins, and you'll practice a different medicine. Consolations that don't lie, and partings that don't bruise. You follow the carts at dusk wheels, whispering over cobbles like low prayers, and the churchyard answers with wax, damp earth, and the candle gutter that turns shadows into gentle arithmetic. Watchmen murmur names. They can't afford to forget. A parish beadle lifts his ledger as if it were a lantern. You, the plague doctor, arrive without trumpet. Leather creak, cane tap, breath softened inside the beak. Here, grief wears work clothes. Punchy, your job is to make sadness behave without scolding it. Order, first then comfort. Processions that once filled streets now pause at doorways. A priest's hand through a shutter, a whispered psalm that weighs more than volume. Curfew holds back crowds so air can move, and nerves can stand still. You step in after last rites, not to hurry love, but to stage the room for leaving. Sheets straightened, window cracked a vinegar bowl under the sill to teach breath manners. This too is bubonic plague medicine, etiquette for the air. Ground is a patient. You rid sod clay and the mood of the water table, the way you'd read a pulse. Grave diggers test the depth by sound. Shovels ring like tempered bells. Lime waits in shy sacks, not as punishment, but as a promise that nature will keep its side of the bargain. Rows are plotted like pages with wide margins. Space, even in farewell, is dignity. Records keep the living from forgetting what the living must remember. Mortality rolls open to neat columns. Name, parish, date. A brief sentence that refuses gossip. The beadle recites. You confirm. Ink dries into memory that won't erode in rumours. When families return later, the ledger will lead them to a place, not just a story. History starts here, under wax drips and steady hands. You steward rituals without letting them fray. No crowded marches. Instead, candles set at thresholds. Light accepting the duty that voices cannot carry tonight. You pass a cloth of rose water to the priest. He passes blessing to the family. Hush does the heavy lifting. Inside the beak, your breath fogs, clears, and commits to being smaller than their moment. Staging the yard is hospitality for the inevitable. Lanterns to windward first, then leeward so smoke travels with manners. Paths chalked, so feet know where not to wander. Buckets labelled clean, used, retired, nouns that rescue chaos from adjectives. The brazier sits well away from canvas. Sparks don't get to vote. Your leather cloak speaks rule in a voice everyone can hear without feeling commanded. Families arrive with parcels of memory, a ribbon, a psalm on scrap, a ring tied with thread. You listen like a wall that refuses to fall. Promises are written in the margin. Return in spring. Mark in stone when the city breathes easier. The beetle witnesses. The ledger nods. Paper becomes a second spine when grief goes soft in the knees. Even here, you guard the living. A bench under the yew where drafts are honest. Water at arm's reach. A herbal sachet of rosemary and rue by the gate to nudge breath toward patience. A vinegar sponge for hands that tremble and remember. Children count lanterns instead of fears, and mothers exhale incomplete sentences again. Small mercies scale well. Rumour tries to bloom wherever silence grows. You redirect it toward chores. Help me chalk the lane. Hold the lantern here. A quarrel dissolves into two straighter lines and a steadier flames. Useful tasks are lullabies for frightened minds. By the fifth lantern, people forget they were arguing. Your distance is not coldness, it's care shaped like space. Pat, lowered voice, quiet, verbs, small and exact. Step, wait, breathe, here. The cane points rather than prods. The gesture does the teaching. Respect travels farther than warning, and faster than spectacle. The yard learns your cadence, and keeps it when you leave. When work pauses, the place hums like a ship. At anchor, wind edges candles, wax finds soil kindly. A bell counts to 10 and decides that's enough. You check gloves, oil seams, straighten buckets, as if neatness were a blanket. Discipline touches sorrow without making it flinch. The city, for a moment, feels coached rather than cursed. Before the gate closes, you walk the rows once more. Names checked, tools at rest, distances held. The beadle shuts his book with a tenderness that sounds like sleep. You taste smoke and rosemary behind the vinegar tang of duty and the ash drift of dust. The latch clicks, the heartbeat of the streets resumes. Tomorrow you'll trade candles for alleys, rat runs, shuttered rooms, and the narrow art of catching a fever before it makes friends. You step into the narrowest vein of the city, the cramped alleys where gutters gossip and shutters pretend not to listen, and you treat the neighbourhood like a patient with poor circulation. The cane taps out punctuation. Your boots translate into policy. You read refuse piles for footprints, grain dust for mouse, scribbles, dripping eaves for flea weather. As a plague doctor, you diagnose the street before the body, where drafts stall, where odours stack, where whispers travel faster than air. Miasma theory snarls with contagion. Logic here, you let them argue while you measure distance and make space. Rat runs are the city's secret streets, and you learn their grammar. Along wall toes, under stair lips, behind bread stalls, beside fish barrels dreaming of yesterday. You kneel, gloved, and touch the dust with 2 fingers. Oily, dotted, busy. Then you rise with a map in your head. You ask the miller what he hears at night. You ask the stable boy what he sweeps at dawn. Flea-ridden bedding and spilled grain are accomplices, not mysteries. You open a window, a hand's breadth, and the room exhales like someone finally told the truth. Caged door, you stage the air before you stage the medicine. Hat, dipped voice low, palms shown. You hang a vinegar sponge by the latch to teach breath manners and minds to follow. Shutters lift, stale heat groans, a candle gutter straightens with the draught you invited. We'll talk, you say, but first we make the room kinder. Bubonic plague medicine starts as architecture. A cracked window, a moved pallet, a corridor for wind to practice honesty. Beds are ships. You reposition them by currents. Off the wall, away from damp stone, nearer the window, but not in the jealous draught. Straw ticks get fluffed outside and then fired in the sun. Smoke thick mornings that feel like sermons the air can understand. Linens boil until they confess. Poultices rest only on clean skin and cleaner cloth. Your leather cloak and wax-sealed seams mutter their own grammar of distance as you work, and the family starts copying your verbs. Lift, air, fold, wait. Rats require diplomacy with teeth. You set jars with sloped throats where runs meet, baited with grain, they won't refuse twice. Food rises to shelves, sacks where boards, underbellies, corners lose their tempting shadows. A small aromatic burner breathes juniper and rosemary in a larder. Not miracle. Memo. Cat gets promoted from pet to colleague. A boy learns to sweep toward light, not into it. You don't promise victory. You promise fewer meetings with the enemy. Then the person in the bed, now that the room can afford honesty. You listen to the pulse like a drummer, counting distance. You greet fever as an impatient guest, weakness as a bad listener, delirium as a poet who arrived uninvited. You glance at the armpit and groin for swollen nodes without making theatre of it. The crystal eye lenses fog clear and teach you patience between beats. You ask caregivers for times, not tragedies. When did the chills begin? When did the cough learn words? Treatment is a braid of small mercies. Fumigation first, a smoke bath that nudges air toward usefulness, then quiet sips. Whey, barley water, a cordial kiss of theriac if appetite can hear its name. Plaster dressings hold a coolness where heat swears. Salves teach skin to remember patience. If a swelling demands it, you manage drained swellings without spectacle privacy. Guarded like treasure, you schedule rest as if it were medicine, because it is, and you forbid heroics that burn tomorrow's strength for today's applause. Now, the household becomes a ward that can survive itself. You chalk a modest roster on the doorpost, who cleanse, who cooks, who rests, who watches. A bell tethered to a thread on the patient's wrist teaches the house to listen without staring. Herbal sachets, rue and wormwood, hang where queues form. A rose water bowl sits between rooms as a truce. Quarantine logic settles in like furniture. Separate palettes, separate cups, shared resolve. You leave a list written in short verbs. Air, boil, sip, sleep, repeat. Rumour drifts faster than fleas. You steer it without scolding. A neighbour blames strangers. Another blames bread. Someone whispers, moo nonsense. You give each a chore. Fetch water. Chalk the lane. Carry straw. And the myth loses its footing while the bucket gains velocity. Parish beadle stops by. You trade a nod and a name for the mortality roll. His tutoring. Justice, like hygiene, is most believable when it looks like routine. Children save the day more often than people admit. You recruit them as draft wardens and jar checkers, paying in figs and new knots learned on the clothesline. They sing a washing song you taught the market. Hands, thumbs, back, rinse, off-key but correct. They carry news better than adults, without seasoning it in panic. The beak mask stops being a monster and becomes the face of chores that make sense. Fear goes outside to smoke and never finds its way back in. Before you leave, you do paperwork that feels like prayer. Parish records get a clean line, date, street, pattern, so tomorrow's map will argue less. You draw a small circle where rat runs and damp meet, a square where new pallets live, a note about the windows, patient hinge. You rest the cane by the jam and listen. Breath calmer, voices quieter, soup considering a boil like a moral decision. The ledger closes with the gentleness you want the night to imitate. Back in the alley, you mark a door with a sign that neighbours will obey without understanding, and you breathe lavender once inside the beak to remind your attention to stay seated. The city exhales a hair cleaner. Drafts learn discipline. Rumour learns chores. You aim your boots toward the apothecary. Supply lines, glass vials, and a tray that smells of angelica and cloves, because the next house will need bottles, not bravery, and the one after that will need both. You step into the apothecary at first bell, where light sifts through oiled parchment panes and dust floats like patient counsel. Shelves crowd upward, glass vials, corks, crocks labelled in a clerk's careful Latin. The mortar speaks in low thunder. The pestle answers like law. Inside the beak, your breath catches angelica, cloves, and a rumour of juniper. The leather cloak creaks. Your cane taps a greeting the floor understands. Today's work is arithmetic. Doses, hours, bodies, hope. We start with what the city calls treasure, and you call tools. Theriac by the finger, not the fist. The apothecary unwraps it, as if revealing a small moon that forgot its sky. You taste for rancid notes, then sign a line that bills your conscience and your purse. Next, a mellow electuary, honey warm, spice bright, obedience in a spoon. Cordials for faint hearts, rose water for dignity, vinegar for the stern sermon. Every bottle is a verb, every cork a promise with a deadline. Labels matter when fatigue steals nouns. You insist on letters your future hands can read. Morning, 2 sips, fever, 1 thimble, sips only, not gulps, written in a clerk's unflappable script. You pack a little theatre for the bedside, ribbons by colour, shapes by purpose. In crisis, people remember red, not rhetoric circles, not paragraphs. The apothecary nods. Good merchants sell clarity before ingredients. You pay extra for legible mercy, and consider it cheap. We restock for rooms that breathe badly, aromatic burners and the coals that make them sing. Cones of rosemary and wormwood for corridors where rumour nests. Twist of myrrh, a sigh of frankincense, not to impress heaven, but to coach air. Bundles of herbal sachets, rue at doors. Sage near pillows, lavender where sleep is shy. You teach households to light smoke like cooking, not ceremony. When air smells purposeful, fear agrees to sit down. Dressings and skin quieters go next. Poultices that cool without scalding, plus the dressings that seal privacy. A salve for chafe under masks, and glove wrist rashes that lie about quitting. You count rolls of linen as if they were breaths you plan to return. Wax and oil for seams. Garments remember kindness better than courage. A spare wide-brim hat because rain confuses discipline. Spare everything. Plague eats spares before it eats plans. Supply lines are veins. You walk them until they confess their weak places. The key hums. Barges bring herbs from hills that don't read. City news. You file writs. So carts pass the quarantine cordon with fumigation, not favours. Barrels get smoked under Juniper's grammar before they meet your shelves. You tip porters in sentences. Handled by the ropes, not the guess. Logistics is love written in ledgers. Fee talk happens in the quiet room behind the tinctures, never in the queue. You negotiate, hazard pay like a grown-up, then spend it on extra corks and better glass. Coins are blunt instruments. Doses are scalpels. You buy scalpels. For the poor, a wax token system. Return any vial, receive broth and a promise. The apothecary smiles at the math because it works. So does your ledger, which stops lying when you feed it truth. You test batches as if tasting soup. Warm, stir, note, wait, repeat. Cordials should greet the tongue politely, not threaten to move in. If an electuary sulks, you ask for more citrus. Fewer cloves. Compliance rises. For children, you trade bitterness for song. Spoons measured to lyrics. Adults get the speech about sips, not gulps rest, not valour. The beak nods. Instruction lands, tomorrow thanks you. Outside you load the tray like a small altar to competence. Vials nested, cloths folded, burners wrapped against jostle. A tally tucked under cork. Who gets 10 days? Who gets 2? Who gets a visit at dusk? Your crystal eye, lenses fog, clear and bless the list. You shoulder the weight, the way you shoulder duty, evenly, on purpose. The doorbell chirps, the street inhales what you're carrying. En route, you practice bedside lines, because tone is part of dose. We'll sip together. Let the cloth do the arguing. Sleep is medicine you already own. For the skeptic, try this for a day. Let me be wrong tomorrow. For the frantic, hold this sponge. Count to 20 with me. For yourself, one house at a time, one breath per line. The beak makes theatre. The words make bridges. Deliveries teach you which houses learned yesterday and which need tomorrow sooner. At first door, a mother meets you with a ledger of her own, sips tallied, fevers graphed in thread on the sill. You trade her stronger cordial, and the kind of praise that buys more effort. At the next, a tired uncle has emptied a bottle as if it promised thunder. You reset the schedule with a clean cup and a watch he can borrow. He returns it before sunset, a small miracle, fully credited. By late afternoon, your tray is lighter and your pockets heavier with requests. A nun asks for 3 burners and 4 prayers. You provide the burners and a silence she appreciates. A beadle wants vinegar sponges for the gate. You write 2 lines that make them policy. A barber surgeon needs plaster that forgives clumsy hands. You add ribbon cues he won't ignore. Even the cats at the mill learn their new job titles, colleagues, not decor. When the city updates its habits, you call it medicine and mean it. Evening. You return for the second load, the way tides return for shorelines. The apothecary has boiled the glass till it squeaks like confession. Corks line up like patient chess pieces. You swap empties for full news for news, and a weary joke for 2 better ones. Your ledger adds columns, loaned watches, returned spoons, windows now obedient. Inside the beak, lavender makes a small case for sleep. You'll ignore a bit longer. Tomorrow's route waits, and with it, the ward where tools become hands, tutorials, demonstrations, and the hard grace of teaching a city to dose itself. You start class at the end of a corridor that smells of rosemary and warm linen. Benches become desks. A brazier becomes a podium. Your cane draws diagrams in ash. Inside the beak, your voice arrives calm and close, never hurried, never bored. Today we save time, you say, because time saves people. One nods ripple from lay sisters to beadles to the barber surgeon, who still overstirs poultices. This is bubonic plague medicine as choreography, not spectacle. Lesson 1 is air, because air is the first patient and the cheapest cure. You crack shutters by finger widths, not heroics. You point to drafts with smoke threads. Everyone practices. Open, count to 20. Close halfway, listen to the candle. Air should move like a polite guest, you say, and the room learns manners. You mark beds downwind of breath and upwind of hope. A map on the floor itself. Now the ward exhales without drama. So do shoulders. Lesson 2 is hands, because hands are rumours that can tell the truth. A bowl, a cloth, a vinegar sponge, then rose water for dignity, not perfume. Thumbs, nails, back of fingers. A song for timing so tired minds don't cheat. Gloves on. Gloves. Off disposal. Bucket labelled. In letters nobody misreads. You praise the first perfect wash like a miracle, and it multiplies. Cleanliness becomes a story everyone enjoys repeating. Lesson 3 is the bed. How to turn one without flipping the courage inside it. 2 attendants move as if carrying warm soup. Slow, level, low voices. Plaster dressings get checked, edge to edge. Poultices cooled then replaced. Linens boil in a schedule written larger than pride on the wall. You teach the quiet tuck. No snaps, no jerks, just gravity persuaded. Patients sleep because the bed learned to stop shouting. Tools next. You empty the tray like a magician whose trick is honesty. Aromatic burners, chords, thimbled measures, cordials labelled in the clerk's saintly script. You tap each bottle and say the verb it performs. Soothe, seal, sip, slow. Theriac is for thimble time, electuary for cooperation, never for promises. The examination stick measures distance when words get nervous. Everyone repeats the verbs until the room speaks policy. Procedures arrive last because they must stand on the shoulders of order. You demonstrate drained swellings with oranges, not bodies. Privacy is part of care. Lancet touch, cloth. Ready, waste away. Seal, quiet. Document, exact. Cupping is mentioned as punctuation. Bloodletting as a footnote few will need. Do nothing loudly, you say. Do something softly. They practice until the oranges look comforted. Rotations turn stamina into math. You draw them big so fatigue can read. Watch a handle's fevers at dawn. Watch bee walks air and water at noon. Night sisters own the hush, checking breaths, turning lamps, counting pulses. Breaks are scheduled. Guilt is not medicine. Tea is, when duty changes hands, the script changes voices, not content. Reliability becomes the lullaby. The ward didn't know it needed. Communication is your favorite drug because dosage is infinite and side effects are hope. Use standardized phrases. We're cooling the fever. We're feeding sleep. We are borrowing tomorrow's strength, not spending it. Questions have a cue. Panic has none. You give panic a chair anyway. At the door, bells at doorways speak status, so mouths can rest. The parish beadle learns the same sentences to carry outside. Rumour starves when language eats first. Tools next. You empty the tray like a magician whose trick is honesty. Aromatic burners, chords, thimbled measures, cordials labelled in the clerk's saintly script. You tap each bottle and say the verb it performs. Soothe, seal, sip, slow. Theriac is for thimble time, electuary for cooperation, never for promises. The examination stick measures distance when words get nervous. Everyone repeats the verbs until the room speaks policy. Procedures arrive last because they must stand on the shoulders of order. You demonstrate drained swellings with oranges, not bodies. Privacy is part of care. Lancet touch, cloth. Ready, waste away. Seal, quiet. Document, exact. Cupping is mentioned as punctuation. Bloodletting as a footnote few will need. Do nothing loudly, you say. Do something softly. They practice until the oranges look comforted. Rotations turn stamina into math. You draw them big so fatigue can read. Watch a handle's fevers at dawn. Watch bee walks air and water at noon. Night sisters own the hush, checking breaths, turning lamps, counting pulses. Breaks are scheduled. Guilt is not medicine. Tea is, when duty changes hands, the script changes voices, not content. Reliability becomes the lullaby. The ward didn't know it needed. Communication is your favorite drug because dosage is infinite and side effects are hope. Use standardized phrases. We're cooling the fever. We're feeding sleep. We are borrowing tomorrow's strength, not spending it. Questions have a cue. Panic has none. You give panic a chair anyway. At the door, bells at doorways speak status, so mouths can rest. The parish beadle learns the same sentences to carry outside. Rumour starves when language eats first. Data rounds. Ledgers open. Candos seated. Blame outdoors in the rain. Columns for fever, weakness, skin blotches. Hours since last cordial windows. Opened twice. A red circle where rat runs tried ambition. a green tick where air behaved. You invite one error per person and thank the fastest correction. Patterns emerge, policy updates itself without taking offense. This is how a ward gets smarter than any one of you. Morale drills are not jokes. They're architecture for minds. You lead the minute of stillness, hands on rails, eyes on flame, breath counted. A clean joke after rounds is ritual, not rebellion. It keeps fear from monologuing. You post a wall of exact praise, linen boiled on time, perfect quiet tuck, model draft. Hazard pay a rise with the same voice as gratitude, steady, adult, untheatrical. People work like sailors when the ship respects them. Discharge isn't a door, it's a ramp. You rehearse the home kit, cordial schedule, herbal sachets, window drill, utensil code. One page with pictures, one with verbs, one with the only phone, your knock. You send a ribbon for the door that means visited, improving, be kind. Needle escorts, not as guard, but as witness. Recovery joins the city as policy, not rumour. Before you dismiss class, you stage one last scene, and intake done perfectly at half speed. They watch your leather cloak, your wide brim hat, the way the beak mask nods instead of argues. Cane taps, shutters breathe, cloth cools, words land, ledger closes. You remove the mask slowly, so they remember there's a person inside the theatre. Resolve tastes like lavender and smoke, and a little exhaustion. Tomorrow you'll take this show to the street. Inspection raids in alleys where innocence and negligence look exactly alike until the cane points at the difference. You take the beadle and two watchmen into the city's narrow grammar, where steps echo like punctuation. Cramped alleys, lean inward trading gossip. Shotters practice not looking guilty. Your cane taps the cadence of policy. Pause, inspect, adjust, move. Inside the beak mask, breath muffles, then steadies to the vinegar. Tang you trust. Tonight the neighbourhood is the patient, and compliance is the pulse. As a plague doctor, you read corners. Before faces, air before arguments. First stop is a baker's lean-to where heat bullies air into standing still. Smokestacks under the awning, like rumours without exits or verbs. You lift the canvas a hand's breadth. A draft strolls through like a calm idea. Hold it there, you say, and the watchman chalks a line. The wind can remember. The needle notes, time stall change. Leilger as stethoscope, market as lung. Bubonic plague medicine begins with geometry. Nobody applauds. A fishmonger bargains loudly with the night, salt and brine singing in tired buckets. Scales shine, flies rehearse, the awning sulks, too low for honest breath. You shift the table toward the lane, where air keeps appointments. A small aromatic burner whispers juniper behind the stall like well-behaved seasoning. No sermon, just a nod. Better. Compliance loves. Praise more than fines. Compliance slips when corners collect private weather. Value in the afternoon. You kneel where wall meets stair and touch dust for oily commas. There are runs, fresh and ambitious, written in grain and tiny feet. Boards slide under sacks. Jars trap the path. Shelves rise to where cats keep office hours. Sweep toward the light, not into it, you tell the boy with the broom. He grins. The promotion from nuisance to colleague always lands. A door opens on a room that coughs first and speaks later. Air is stale bread. Linens confess they've skipped boiling. You stage the space like triage for a house. Shutters cracked, bed pulled off the damp wall. Herbal sachets of rosemary and rue hang where cues of breath form. A vinegar sponge by the latch train's hands to remember patience. You don't scold, you schedule. Boil at dawn, air at noon, rotate at dusk. Next, a tavern that insists on laughter at close range. Benches slide apart. Cups get ribbons, red for this corner, blue for that. You post a bell drill, ring, rinse, breathe, resume the anecdote at a safer distance. The owner sighs until you praise his knots. Pride is the cheapest disinfectant. A small fine for yesterday's crowding becomes a discount when the lanes stay true. Law with a hinge works better than law with teeth. In an upper alley, a widow keeps 3 pallets in a room, brave but confused. You make an aisle for drafts and a schedule for sips that nerves can follow. Plaster dressings replace tired cloth. Poultices cool heat that believes in itself. 2 windows 3 times. You write, drawing pictures for fatigue to obey. She asks if this is cure. You say it is habit that buys time for cure to arrive. Truth, that isn't cruel, turns into furniture people use. Fines are last, not first, and they come with instructions printed larger than blame. A stall pays in candles for the churchyard. A landlord pays in fresh straw for the ward. The beadles will move slowly, so dignity can keep up. When coins must change hands, they purchase buckets, burners and soap. Not shame. Receipts list verbs. Air, boil, space, repeat. Because numbers don't cure anything alone. Policy becomes a shopping list for survival. You audit water the way others audit coins. Barrels live at stall ends, not in gossiping clumps. Ladles sleep in vinegar between shifts. A watchman times the rinse on. You taught the ward-off key, but honest. Children volunteer as bucket sheriffs. Mothers smile into their shawls. Clean hands are cheaper than funerals, you say, and nobody argues with arithmetic. When routine turns catchy, you've made medicine contagious on purpose. In the worst alley, the air is a stuck door, and the problem is all nouns with canvas, crates, cords, corners, things that block, trip, trap, and sulk. You turn the noun pile into verbs: lift, tie, hang, fold, stack. A new lane appears like a sentence rewritten by someone awake. The watchman breathes deeper without noticing. That's the point. The ledger gets a small green mark that means keeps its promises. Notices go up where walls accept news. Pictograms for tired eyes, verbs for tired minds. 1 page for windows, 1 for beds, 1 for cups and ladles. You add a ribbon code: white for learned, grey for learning, black for visit again. The beadle will walk this loop tomorrow, and the next. Habits need witnesses. Even the cats get enlisted, collars with bells, so rats study elsewhere. A city that recruits everything wins without shouting. Midnight nearly arrives, and the alley stops arguing for a minute. You hear water where buckets wait, smell rosemary where corners used to hoard. The beadle closes his book like someone putting a child to sleep. Your leather cloak takes 1 more breath of wormwood and night. Again tomorrow, you say, because effectiveness is repetition with manners. And tomorrow starts at the city hall, where edicts and coin decide whether tonight's good habits get the scaffolding they deserve. City Hall wakes late, but talks loud. You arrive at first bell anyway, because bureaucracy respects the person who shows up with clean ledgers and quiet shoes. The antechamber smells of tallowed damp cloaks, and yesterday's decisions reheated. Your beak mask tilts toward the clerk, who files hope alphabetically. Your cane taps a patient preface on stone. Today your patient has columns and a budget. As a plague doctor, you'll practice bubonic plague medicine in the dialect of coin, writs, and ink. Start with proof that doesn't shout. You spread maps where rumour used to live. Red circles for rat runs, green slashes for obedient lanes, blue dots for barrels that kept their promises. Mortality rolls open like disciplined throats. Dates align with curfews, markets, rains. You speak in verbs the council understands. Air, boil, space, repeat. The room leans forward. Evidence is the incense of City Hall. Even the skeptical inhale. Edicts need bones and lungs. Latin first. You propose a quarantine ordinance with teeth that bite behaviours, not dignity, gate staffed, city gate inspection standardised. Writs of protection legible at a glance. Then breath. Exemptions for bread carts, timed lanes for water carriers, a ribbon code for homes already coached. You sell the idea that rules travel faster when they're simple enough to memorise. The alderman with the tired eyes nods. Memorization is cheaper than manpower. Funding is the pulse. You find it and steady it without flinching. Line items march, straw ticks for the pest house, oil for wax-sealed scenes, aromatic burners and coal, cordials by the dozen, linen by the mile. Hazard pay for night, watches who keep lanes honest. A small bursary for widows who follow window drills without complaint. You do the math aloud, so nobody imagines magic. Numbers stop being arguments and start being rescue. You write the edict while they're still saying, perhaps. Curfews at sensible bells, market geometry carved into chalk, fines that purchase soap, not shame. Fee negotiation for you and the apothecaries remains discreet, professional, adult, untheatrical. The scribe's quill travels as if it trusts you. That's the moment you've been earning since the first candle you straightened in the ward. Public messaging wins or loses the week. You draft notices that speak in pictures, first verbs, second fear, last. One page, a window cracked to finger width, a candle that stands, a draft that smiles. Another, a bed pulled from the wall, a bucket labelled Don. You add a parish version for the beadle, a market version for stall holders, a gate version for watchmen. The law sounds like one voice in 3 octaves. Not everything passes the first vote. You plan for human weather. A guild protests the lane widths. You trade them a narrower corridor for stricter bucket discipline. A magistrate hates incense. You replace juniper smoke with rosemary sprigs and a vinegar sponge. Same outcome, calmer noses. Compromise that keeps air honest is not surrender. It's engineering. You say that out loud and let the phrase find chairs. Behind doors, you bargain for the unglamorous scaffolding. Extra messengers to carry ledgers between ward and hall without losing pages to rain. Space by the key for fumigation. Sheds that don't flirt with warehouses. A covered alley for body carts that protects privacy and morale. You call it logistics. They call it compassion with better shoes. Everyone's right. Audit hour. You propose a loop that corrects itself. Beadles bring daily tallies. Beds filled, windows opened, fines repurposed into soap and straw. You return next dawn with a 1-page digest. What worked? What drifted? What broke? The council learns to love small course corrections instead of scandal-sized reversals. Routine becomes contagious in the only way you want contagion to be. Diplomacy extends beyond walls. Couriers ask about neighbouring towns. You recommend a Venetian quarantine in miniature, 40 days scaled to carts and patience. Send rosemary, not panic. Send the poster, not the rumour. City Hall stamps the advice with a seal, heavy enough to cross bridges without stopping for arguments. Policy travels better than pity when it carries maps. Ceremony matters because people are watching the tone more than the text. When the edict is read on the steps, you stand one pace, back hat lowered, not the hero of the piece. The leather cloak whispers rules without swagger. The beak mask faces the crowd and nods once. Bells answer with timing that your ledger's designed. Fishwife wipes her hands. A mason adjusts a shutter. A child points to a picture on the poster and gets it. The city exhales exactly one notch. Afternoon turns to ink again. You countersign receipts and leave with lighter pockets and heavier bags. Ribbons, notices, tokens for broth. On the threshold you pause and sniff the day. Less panic in the wax, more rosemary in the wind, fewer sentences ending in fists. The clerk thanks you in a voice that sounds like a bed, finally quieting. Tomorrow, you'll test these edicts in the fiercest classroom. Tenement stairwells and garrets, where miasma theory and contagion logic tie, knots you'll have to untie with cloth patience and a very persuasive window. You climb the tenement stair that leans like an exhausted hymn, hand on rail, mind on drafts. The wood smells of cabbage, coal, and laundry that gave up at noon. Your cane taps, time so hearts can borrow its rhythm. Inside the beak mask, breath is a small, well-behaved animal. Here bubonic plague medicine begins as carpentry for air. You'll fix the building's lungs before you talk to its fevers. Posters go up where eyes naturally rest. Landings, not ceilings, hinges, not sermons. Pictures first, a cracked shutter, a candle standing, a bed pulled from damp wall. Verbs second, air, boil, space, repeat, letters fat enough for fatigue to read. You add a ribbon code the beadle can audit. White learned, grey learning, black revisits. Neighbours study the drawings like weather maps for bodies. The house agrees to try being smarter. On the first floor, a room hums like a kettle with nowhere to whistle. Shutters are nailed, shut by a winter that won't admit it retired. You pry a finger-width piece, and the air remembers its job. A child watches you the way kittens watch competence. You hand her the vinegar sponge and make her draft captain. Promotion turns fear into chores. Chores turn houses into wards. Beds next, little boats you move by current, not muscle. Off the stone, away from the corner that hoards damp like gossip. Straw tick aired and beaten outside. Linens queued for the pot. You show the quiet tuck, and the aunt repeats it without spilling hope. Poultices rest on fresher cloth. Plaster dressings get edges checked like treaties. The room stops arguing with itself and starts listening. Kitchen is a parliament you can sway with geometry. Fire stays, but benches rotate so smoke. Learns better manners. A small aromatic burner, rosemary and bay, sits where laughter crowds. Ladles nap in vinegar between stories. Cups earn ribbons by corner. You teach the rinse song you drilled in the ward. Hands, thumbs, back, rinse. Bad habits blink, yawn and wander off without a fight. In the garret, heat perches with the pigeons and refuses to help. Oiled parchment panes sweat. A candle gutter betrays sluggish air. You prop the casement with a measured stick you name health. A line of herbal sachets, rue, wormwood, lavender, hangs like patient bunting. No miracles, just a corridor for breath to commute. You nod when the flame stands up straighter than the tenant. Now the tenant's pulse, questions, and the arithmetic of hours. Fever when, not why, chills how many. Not are you afraid? Swollen nodes are checked with privacy, not theatre. Notes stay neat. You pour a thimble cordial. Theriac, if appetite agrees to listen. 2 sips, then rest. Heroism is rescheduled for next month. Calm instruction is the softest drug with the best outcomes. Stairs gather rumour faster than dust. You root it through work. A man blames foreigners. A woman blames bread. A boy blames the moon. Carry these buckets. Chalk this lane. Tie that window. By the time arguments return, they're too tired to start a riot. The parish beadle logs names and chores. Justice earns a clipboard. Even resentment likes a checklist. You audit water like a banker audits coin. Barrels live at landings, not doorways. Spills are taxed with mops. Ladles have posts, buckets have titles, clean, used, retired. A child counts to 20 while hands meet vinegar without drama. You praise the best landing as model draft. Replication beats revelation every day of the week. Attic to cellar. You pace the building like a slow metronome. Leather cloak whispers, boots translate creaks into policy. You mark a rat run under the stair and set jars like polite traps. Bread rises on shelves. Grain sacks get boards under bellies. The house gains height without adding floors. Cats get promoted to middle management with bells that ring like good news. Paperwork, then parting, because endings should also breathe. Ledger lines for fevers, drafts, windows, buckets. A red circle for the stubborn corner. You leave a 1-page kit, pictures, verbs, times, and your knock. A ribbon for the door, visited, improving, be kind. Inside the beak, lavender suggests sleep. You'll ignore until later. The stairwell exhales. You answer with 1 tap and move on. Outside, dusk organizes itself into watch bells and cooking smoke. From the street you see posters, behave, and curtains, obey. Tenement looks taller. Not in bricks, but in habits. As a plague doctor, you've taught air to vote and furniture to participate. Bubonic, plague, medicine. Feels like housekeeping because survival usually does. Next stop, workshops and guild halls, shared tools, shared breath, and the delicate art of making productivity keep its distance from contagion. You enter the carpenter's hall at first light, why sawdust hangs like golden fog and hammers speak before people do. Benches crowd the windows, shutters sulk half closed out of habit, not wisdom. Apprentices breathe in chorus, sticky with sleep and resin. Your cane taps the floorboards, translating noise into policy, bustle into lanes. Inside the beak mask breath finds the vinegar tang that keeps thoughts tidy. As a plague doctor, you treat production like a patient with too many hands. Air is your first tool, and you lend it better manners. Shutters open by finger widths, counted, not guessed. Doors lift a hand's breadth to invite a small, polite river. You rotate benches so backs face drafts and faces face work, not each other's lungs. Handle gutter straightens. The room learns to exhale on purpose. Air should commute, you say, and the foreman smirks until his shoulders drop. That drop is bubonic plague, medicine disguised as architecture. Shared tools are rumours with handles. You teach them grammar. Saws, cue by size. Mallets wear chalk dots after washing. Chisels nap in vinegar between hands. A ladle and bowl station sits where apprentices can pretend not to see it. You label racks with verbs, cut, clamp, plane, and add a line, rinse, wipe, hang. Pride stops arguing when the pegs look handsome. Wanted it else email. Wells, and wanted us, I'll ship captured one, all of yours, Order is the compliment that pays wages in calm. You set a rhythm the room can keep, even on bad days. Work, rinse, breathe, sip. Every hour on the hour, a bell the size of a spoon. A jug of rose water for dignity. Cool cloths for wrists that carry heat like gossip. Wash your hands like you sharpen your tools, you say, and men nod without irony. The foreman copies your schedule onto a board, fat letters for tired eyes. Routine becomes the quiet foreman. Nobody resents. Some workshops argue with the nose before they argue with the lungs. Danner's yard speaks in acids and weather. The dye hall in steam and accident. We stage aromatic burners where corners hoard breath, a thin line of rosemary against the door. Not miracle, memo. Harry remembers, then behaves. You move vats apart, so steam stops falling in love with itself. Colour still sings, now it sings in tune with drafts. Apprentices are your favourite lever, because they move the building. You deputise a draft captain, a bucket sheriff, and a bench marshal, paying in praise, and the right to ring the spoon bell. They grin like promoted cats. Adults follow grinning children faster than scolding priests. A boy demonstrates the hand-wash song off-key, but on time. Another times the window drill, the candle salutes. Contagion hates choreography. You make choreography catchy. Guild politics are an apron with a ledger. The warden worries fines will sour morale. You trade them for trophies that read, model draft, clean tools, quiet tuck. Winners get first pick of lumber or die slots. Losers get an eye roll and a better map. Coins still change hands, into soap, straw, and new pegs, not into shame. You staple a ribbon code to the door. White learned, grey learning, black revisit. Accountability becomes decor, and nobody minds. You design pathways so bodies stop arguing with cargo. Carts enter by windward, leave by leeward. Sacks rise on board so rats miss their appointment. You set jars with sloped throats where rat runs cross wall toes. Cats receive promotions with bells that tell the truth. Brooms sweep toward light, not into it. Refuse meets a bin, not philosophy. The floor reveals grain you forgot to admire. Cleanliness makes craft look more like itself. Not every hall is wood and dye. Some are steel and choir. A smithy heat bullies air into sitting still. You lift the louver and invent a breeze with a door held just so. An anvil pauses. The fire learns it has to share the ceiling. You place benches in a fan so sparks don't collect friends, and men don't share breath. They didn't mean to. A vinegar sponge hangs where sweat wants excuses. Even iron listens when the draft speaks clearly. Then the human part, parcelled into minutes. The foreman can afford. Pulse checks at break. Fever, weakness, any skin blotches that want an interview. A thimble of cordial. Theriac. If appetite consents, a lectuary if pride needs sweetness. Cool cloths for wrists. Plaster dressings for scrapes that pretend to be stoic. You schedule naps like materials, scarce, valuable, not negotiable. Heroism gets politely rescheduled to after recovery. Paperwork closes the loop without closing the day. Ledger lines for windows, open tools, rinsed brakes, kept vats spaced. A red circle where breath still sulks. A green tick where the candle stands like a soldier. You leave a one-page kit, pictures, verbs, times, that a tired apprentice can obey at dusk. The warden signs a copy, pins it next to wages. Policy becomes one more tool that fits the hand. Out on the street, shutters breathe in unison. You can hear it if you walk slowly. The Guildhall looks taller, not in brick but in habit. Your leather cloak and wide brim hat carry the smell of lavender and oak dust. You nod to the foreman, to the boy with the spoon bell, to the cat who finally has a job title. As a plague doctor, you've taught productivity to share air without sharing illness. Next, the harbour. Quays, rope, tide and cargo that tell stories while trying to sneak past the quarantine cordon. You reach the harbour at grey dawn, where gulls write rude comments in the air, and tar warms to a low forgiving shine. Quays thrum under boots. Ropes creak like old knees, remembering younger storms. Tide breathes in paragraphs, long, slow, persuasive. Inside the beak, your breath picks up salt pitch and the vinegar tang you trust. No. Your cane taps a maritime meter. Pause, inspect, clear, release. Today, the water is your patient, and the current carries rumours faster than carts. First, the quarantine sheds, timber ribs and oiled parchment panes glowing like a careful sunrise. You stage them like classrooms that smell of juniper and resolve. A chalk line on the floor is the difference between safe and sorry. Windward in, leeward out. You tell the stevedores, the rule is choreography, not poetry. Braziers hum. Aromatic burners lace the rafters with rosemary and bay. Even gulls seem to read the arrows and shut up. Manifests arrive like confession letters. You read them as pulse charts. Origin, days at sea. Sick aboard rats, seen cargo that sweats. Each phrase a symptom. You hold the parchment to the light, listening for lies that paper tells in warps. The captain speaks weather. You ask about bunks and buckets. A clerk marks the ledger. The harbour learns to count without drama. Bubonic plague medicine starts as paperwork that respects the tide. Boarding is theatre with honest props, hat off, palms shown, questions exact. Your cane becomes an examination, stick measuring distance when words wobble. Crew lines up by hammocks, not bravado. Pulse first, cough second, bravely third. A vinegar sponge waits at the gangplank like a small bouncer with good manners. You praise the neatest mess deck, so pride will handle half your labour. On ships, praise is ballast. Cargo is rumo, with splinters, so you teach it grammar. Bales of wool breathe under slatted racks. Grain sacks stand on boards, not on hope. You set jars with sloped throats along rat highways, under knees of timbers near rope bins, beside the friendlier shadows. Cats with bells receive promotions to quartermaster. Tarps lift a hand's breadth. Drafts stroll through like honest customs agents. The hold's mood changes from secret to supervised. Fumigation should sound like cooking, not panic. Juniper smoke drifts in polite blue threads. Wormwood adds a sentence the air will remember. You time burns to the bell and the tide, letting wind collaborate. Ropes get rubbed, not soaked. Canvas learns to dry without sulking. A seaman laughs when the candle stops guttering. Proof better than sermons. Your leather creaks. The shed hums approval. Sailors are the city's postal service for breath. You treat them as such. Questions in a cadence. Fever, chills, blotches, dreams like broken compasses. Where swollen nodes hide, you keep privacy, not theatre. Plaster dressings, sealed quiet. A thimble of theriac if appetite nods. A lectuary when pride needs sweetness. Cool cloths to wrists, not foreheads. Their hands do the talking tomorrow. Your plague doctor theatre is minimal. Your timing is excellent. The piermasters worry coin. You translate coin into routine. Stalls set farther apart along the quay. Barrels wear ribbons by inspection, status. Hazard pay for men who keep lanes honest, not heroic. Steady is the hero. Fines purchase soap buckets, rope, tools that teach order to stick. A board lists ships cleared, delayed, and coached. In lettering the sea can read. Administration becomes part of the scenery, like tide marks. Whoa, star. Venetian wisdom in miniature. Time as a wall with windows. 40 days is a novel. You write a short story. 7 for low risk, 14 for maybe. Boats anchor in a lazaretto cove where wind does half the policing. A skiff carries notices and herbal sachets rather than tempers. Captains grumble until the ledger draws a line from patience to profit. Trade survives because you slowed it just enough to breathe. By noon, the key is a symphony that knows its sheet. Stevedores chant the rinse song between slings. Watchmen count, not complain. A child points at a poster. Wind arrows, bucket icons, a cat with a bell. Policy in cartoons. You swap out one aromatic burner and the air stays literate. A gull steals a fig, and nobody swears beyond the necessary. When order gets boring, you've won the day. Not everything behaves. A privateer's sloop arrives, with swagger and a cough. You board slower than their pride expects, which is the point. Masks on hat low, palms open. We'll do this well, or we'll do it twice. The captain sighs, then cooperates at exactly the speed of your pen. 3 sailors earn a day in the shed's shaded cots. The rest earn clean water and rules. Discipline travels faster than bravado when it has a map. Dusk paints Tara kinder black. The harbour loosens its jaw. You sign the last manifest circle, 2 rat runs and return a cat with a promotion. The ledger closes like a tide gate. Your wide brim hat tastes of lavender and salt. Behind the beak, you promise tomorrow more of the same, because effectiveness is repetition with manners. The city's lungs have learned to inhale the sea without swallowing its secrets. Next, the roads, caravans, inns, and way stations, where dust carries gossip and you'll ask the wind to keep writing in your handwriting. You take the North Road at first light, where dust writes gossip on boots and milestones. Cartwheels hum their tired hymns, crows audit from fence posts without bias. Your cane taps time, so caravans borrow its patience. Inside the beak mask, breath meets straw leather and the vinegar tang you trust. This is bubonic plague medicine with luggage, rules that travel at walking speed. As a plague doctor, you teach distance to move with people, not against them. First checkpoint, a toll arch that doubles as a lung. Windward in, leeward out. Lanes chalked so air keeps appointments. A clerk reads writs while you read faces, pulses, and the grammar of coughs. The examination stick measures honesty when words wobble. Those who pass receive ribbon tokens. Those who pause receive shade and water. Policy learns to wave rather than bark. Caravans are cities on ropes. Merchants, mules, pilgrims, pride. You stage them by stories, not coin. Elders first, infants next, bravado last. Canvas lifts a hand's breadth, so drafts stroll like polite customs agents. Grain rides on boards. Sacks stop flirting with rat runs. Cats earn promotions to quartermasters, bells reporting where paws patrol. A nod replaces an argument. The line remembers how to breathe. Inns are lungs with beer. You rearrange them without insulting the ale. Benches pivot. Hearth smoke learns better manners under a trimmed Louvre. A vinegar sponge hangs at the door. A small bouncer with perfect memory. Mugs adopt corners. Ribbons here, blue there, so breath stays local. An aromatic burner whispers, Rosemary by the dice table, where laughter crowds. The innkeeper sighs, until you praise his knots. Then he brags compliance. Way stations get a drill that fits between hooves and impatience. Water barrels at edges, not in gossiping clumps, ladle snap in vinegar. A shelf of rosewater for dignity, a pot of thin broth for peace. You teach the rinse song children, already know from markets. Travellers hum along. Their hands remember the steps before their minds do. Clean becomes catchy, which is the point. Couriers arrive carrying the rhythm of other towns. You treat them like letters with legs. Brief exam, measured kindness, exact instructions. A thimble cordial, theriac, if appetite nods, electuary, if pride needs sweetness. Plaster dressings for chafe, cool cloths for wrists that write tomorrow. Log roots in ledgers, shaped like maps. Time zones of risk become sentences you can read at a glance. Pilgrims travel on vows and rumour. You give them verbs and pictures. Posters show cracked shutters, calm candles, beds pulled off damp walls. A ribbon code pins to cloaks, white learned, grey learning, black revisit. A beadle walks with them to the next shrine and back to the next lane. Faith keeps step with hygiene when both have simple lyrics. Nobody argues with a song, they can sing tired. Bandits steal breaths as easily as coins. You bargain with geometry. Camps move windward of fires. Tents face the draft, not each other. Watch lines cross where rat runs would like to commute. You stage a lantern drill. 3 swings for danger, 2 for water, 1 for window. Even fear likes a schedule, if it can remember it in the dark. The road learns to argue softly. Cart inspections become theatre with honest props. Tarps up, tarps down. No secrets between sacks and stories. You stir grain with the cane. The candle stops guttering and everyone relaxes. A jar with a sloped throat waits where timber meets shadow. Cats sign their patrols in bell notes. Mice decline the invitation. You stamp the manifest and the captain's mood simultaneously. Weather is medicine with an attitude. You dose it by arrangement. When the wind sulks, you invent a breeze with doors and canvas. When sleet hisses, you buy time with coals banked under a brazier's careful glow. When I go, you can't see. Wormwood and juniper hum in low smoke that teaches air to remember. Shutters travel with the caravan now. Ropes and pegs that make windows wherever you stand. Drafts become portable ethics. Fees and fines are last, because dignity is first. Coins purchase soap, straw, buckets, not humiliation. A landlord pays with fresh rushes for the inn. A guild pays with rope that won't sulk. Receipts list verbs, air, boil, space, repeat, because numbers alone won't cure. Hazard pay arrives like adult gratitude, steady, untheatrical, on time. People comply when policy spends like care. When die Saunans trying wine. Dusk teaches the road to whisper. You mark 3 doors with ribbons, circle a stubborn corner on the ledger, and pocket 2 returned spoons. Inside the beak mask lavender suggests sleep you will courteously ignore. The millerpost watches you pass and nods, as if taking attendance. Behind you, the way station breathes in countable lines. Ahead, the prisons and debtors' yards, crowd, stone, and the hard art of giving discipline a conscience without letting compassion catch a fever. You enter under a gate that exhales cold law, iron sweat, old straw, key metal music. Steps echo like warnings. Torches paint the walls a tired amber. Inside the beak, your breath tastes vinegar, tallow, and resolve. The warden's ledger trembles a little. Your cane steadies the room. Here, the plague doctor treats a building that hoards people and air. Duty walks first, dread follows at a respectful distance. Air, first, always. Corridors become windpipes you widen by inches. Shutters crack to finger widths. Arrow slits learn manners with a prop stick. Windward in leeward out. You chalk it like scripture for stone. Drafts get lanes, not arguments. Smoke learns to vote and leave. A candle gutter stands up straight and salutes without words. That small obedience is bubonic plague, medicine masquerading as carpentry. Intake is theatre with honest props. Hat low, palms shown, questions exact. Your examination stick measures courage when talk wobbles. A vinegar sponge waits like a quiet bouncer at the threshold. Ribbon tag sort arrivals, white observed, grey watch, black isolate. Those who pass get water and a bench. Those who pause get shade. Mercy is scheduling that doesn't apologize for itself. Cells are lungs that forgot their job. You remind them without scolding. Pallets pull off damp walls. Straw ticks air, beat and sun-dry. Lime dust sweetens corners that collect confessions and fleas. You mark floor rectangles, one body, one breath, one blanket. Plaster dressings replace rags that lied about being clean. The room stops snarling. It exhales a sentence that makes sense. Common rooms get geometry instead of speeches. Buckets live apart like quarrelling cousins. Ladles nap in vinegar. Cups adopt corners. Red here, blue there. So breath stays local. An aromatic burner whispers, rosemary where gossip crowds. Benches pivot so faces. Face work, not lungs. When wood scrapes quietly into place, panic loses a stanza. Yard drill turns chaos into choreography. People can remember, sleepy, lines on flagstones, walk, wash, wait, speak, verbs, not poetry. U-time rinses to a spoon bell, even mockers keep the rhythm. Wormwood threads the air. A brazier glows like patient punctuation. Cats with bells patrol grain sheds that used to tell rat stories. Order arrives dressed as boredom and wins on purpose. Rounds then, pulse, chills, the arithmetic of weakness. Swollen nodes get privacy, not theatre. Curtains become kindness that folds well. Poultices cool heat that swears it's immortal. Salves talk skin down. A thimble of theriac when appetite nods. Electuary when pride wants sugar. Cool cloths sit at wrists, not foreheads. Hands must work tomorrow. You prescribe sleep like a craft with tools and times. Isolation that respects the person works better than fear that performs. You stage a lazaretta wing. Clean pallets, quiet lanes, windows that understand. Curfew becomes cadence, not punishment. Meals rotate like planets. Watchmen swap keys without swagger. The beadle logs breath, not rumour. Priest brings last, writes through a shutter with hands that don't shake. Discipline and compassion stop pretending they're enemies. Violence travels on boredom. You give boredom a job. Lanterns here, chalk there, ladles counted, cords rewoven. Your cane points never pokes. The gesture does the teaching. A quarrel evaporates into two straighter lines and a rinsed bucket. Scapegoats outside, tasks inside. This is the treaty. Even the loud men learn the sentence. After washing will argue. Debtor's yard needs policy, shaped like hope. Ledgers trade insults for math. Days owed, days worked, days healed. Families deliver aliposset and bread at distances that make sense. Tokens buy soap, not shame. Fines buy straw for someone poorer. You negotiate hazard pay for sweepers who keep lanes honest. Dignity costs less than disorder and pays back daily. Records are the lungs of honesty. You keep them breathing. Mortality rolls. Speak plain. Name, date, sell. Outcome, no theatre. Posters use pictures first. Cracked shutter, calm candle, spaced palettes. Ribbons mark progress. White, learned. Grey, learning. Black, revisit. Audits arrive at the hour, not the scandal. A prison that measures well misbehaves less. At lockup you walk the rounds one last time. Seams oiled, buckets labelled, burners banked to a glow. Inside the beak, lavender makes a small case for sleep. Keys clack like punctuation. The gate chooses a period, not an exclamation. Your leather cloak tastes of lime smoke and careful promises. Tomorrow, the Foundling Hospital and Orphan Wards. Tiny beds, big drafts, and the art of teaching safety to people who dream with their fists unclenched. You step through a door painted the colour of careful where lullabies share walls with coughs. Cradles line the hall like small boats, waiting for a tide of breath. Inside the beak mask, your voice becomes a whisper that knows the room's name. Wax and milk sweeten. The air, tallow and laundry argue softly in corners. Your cane taps time so tiny hearts can borrow a steadier rhythm. Here, the plague doctor practices courage scaled for hands the size of buttons. Admissions arrive swaddled in stories nobody could finish writing. A matron takes notes the way a midwife catches truth. Firm, gentle, exact. You hang a vinegar sponge by the latch to teach breath its manners. A bowl of rose water waits for foreheads and feelings, dignity before dosages. Name, if known. Ribbon, if not, you say, and the ledger nods without judging. Bubonic plague medicine begins as paperwork that refuses to forget. Air first, because air is the blanket you can afford for everyone. Shutters find a finger-width truce. Casements learn to breathe without boasting. You draw wind lanes across the floor in chalk the colour of snow. A candle gutter straightens, small fire agreeing to the new arrangement. Cradles rotate so faces meet sleep not each other's exhale. Drafts become guardians instead of rumours with cold hands. Beds are boats, you rig them for weather nobody voted on. Straw is beaten in the yard, sun warmed and returned like an apology. Plaster dressings wait for scrapes earned by learning to be brave. Swaddles get the quiet tuck. No snaps, only gravity persuaded. Hot bricks, wrapped in cloth, sit at footboards, coals with good manners. The room stops fidgeting. The room remembers how to hush. Feeding is a liturgy with spoons for psalms. Goat's milk warms to a kindness. Thin gruel practices patience in bowls. You teach a timing song. Sip, breathe, rest. 3 notes, 1 mercy. For fussy bellies, a fingertip of electri sweetens cooperation. The matron smiles, like a clock that prefers accuracy to heroics. Hunger loses its temper and agrees to negotiate. Hands learn a dance, humble enough to repeat tired. Wash to the wrist, thumbs, nails, rinse to the song. The market loves. Gloves. On, gloves off. Buckets labelled clean, used, retired. A herbal sachet, lavender and rue, hangs where cues of breath form. You praise the first perfect wash as if it were architecture. Order blushes and decides to stay for supper. Rounds are arithmetic wrapped in lullabies. Pulse warmth, the geography of swollen nodes, checked with privacy, not theatre. Poultices cool, prideful heat. Salves talk skin down from its opinions. A thimble of theriac, only if appetite agrees to listen. You document in letters big enough for midnight to read. Data becomes a nightlight that doesn't flicker. Blaze the disinfectant nobody budgets for and everybody needs. You deputize draft captains with ribbons the colour of courage. Blocks stack near windows, not in corners that hoard breath. Cats with bells receive promotions to assistant quartermasters of crumbs. Laughter travels in place of panic. The room copies the better rumour. Distraction turns out to be medicine with excellent bedside manners. Mothers and wet nurses bring weather in their shawls. Fear, hope, errands. You stage a porch of questions where shame is not invited. A vinegar bowl and rose watercloth sit between sentences like referees. You trade recipes for fumigation that smells like cooking, not dread. They leave with pictures, verbs, and a knock they can borrow. The gate closes softer than it opened. That is policy succeeding. Records are the orphanage's second spine. Names, dates, ribbons, windows open twice fevers that learn to be brief. A small column for blessings, returned spoons, borrowed watches, naps kept. The Beadle's script is steadier than rumour and kinder than memory. When donors visit ledgers, sing in sums that sound like blankets. Math turns into warmth without making speeches about it. Hindway. Night drill is a symphony of quiet chores. Coals banked, shutters set, aromatic burners whisper rosemary to corners. Spoon bell at the hour, water raised where hands can find it asleep. Lanterns spaced like stars that remember the map. Dart! Your leather cloak creaks wool into the rafters. The rafters agree. Even the mice decide to postpone their committee meeting. Before you leave, you walk the rows once more, counting breaths like coins you intend to return. Inside the beak, lavender suggests sleep. You'll borrow in installments. A cradle squeaks. You oil the hinge because mechanics is mercy. You sign the ledger where the matron keeps her courage. The door answers with hinge music. That means hold the line. Next stop, the winter campaign. Soup lines, coal vouchers, and the hard grace of teaching an entire city to hibernate without losing its heartbeat. You write winter into ledgers the city will miss in spring. Columns for soup ladles, coal weights, blankets, returned, windows obedient. A red circle for corners that hoard sleet, green ticks for rooms that learned manners. Curfew bells shift a quarter hour to spare toes from cruel errands. Receipts list verbs, bank, air, sip, sleep, because numbers alone don't warm. The council funds more pegs, fewer speeches. You call that progress. Sickness still knocks, but softer, when rooms rehearse warmth. Fever meets cloth, not panic. Weakness meets gruel that knows patience. Plaster dressings forgive chafed winter skin. Sal's talk cracks down from drama. A thimble of a lecturer convinces appetite to return to the conversation. You check swollen nodes with privacy and a clock, not a drum. Recovery happens in sentences, not exclamations. Steady, small, sufficient. Rumour hates chores. You give it plenty. Stack the wood this way, chalk the lane, post the poster at elbow height. Coral dissolves into 2 straighter rows and a cleaner ladle. Cats acquire bells and job titles. Rats request a transfer. Watchmen trade, swagger for schedules, and find they prefer it. Winter looks taller when everyone knows what to do with their hands. Before midnight, you walk the loop, yard, kitchen, shelter, market, counting warmth like coin. Inside the beak, lavender and smoke. Invent a truce, your lungs. Accept. Snow begins, respectful and slow. The city decides to be brave in unison. Your leather cloak remembers 100 small promises and keeps them. You close the ledger where tomorrow will start with soup again. And when spring pretends to arrive, you'll stand by the river, measuring Thor like policy, teaching Thor not to squander what winter taught. Dawn arrives late, blue and stingy frosting breath into little contracts you can see. Streets crisp underfoot. Rhyme sketches ivy on shutters that won't admit they're shivering. Your cane taps time. People queue where chalk told them hope would be warm. Inside the beak you taste smoke, vinegar, and the memory of rosemary. This is winter's clinic. Pots, coals, blankets, and patience that doesn't brag. As a plague doctor, you prescribe temperature and timing like medicine. Soup lines are arteries. You keep them from clotting with simple verbs. Windward in leeward out. Banners show arrows for tired eyes. Ladles nap in vinegar. Cups wear ribbons by corner to keep breaths local. A bell paces, serving so elbows don't invent politics. Thin broth becomes policy. Hot, honest, repeat. People warm from the inside and forget to be afraid for 5 minutes. The coal yard is a ledger with soot on its thumbs. You print vouchers that buy heat instead of humiliation. Weight, date, address, witness. Sacks move by alphabet, not argument. A beadle counts with a kinder abacus. Children haul smaller bags marked with stars. Pride stays upright. You post a poster. Bank the fire, crack the shutter, let smoke leave with manners. Hearths learn to behave like citizens. Draft control turns stone into something almost polite. Rags become snakes that sleep along doors. Shutters get a finger width truce. Chimneys earn inspections that sound like compliments. Draws well, no sulk. You lone sticks named health to prop casements when wind remembers mercy. A candle gutter straightens, the room stops arguing with its own weather. Bubonic plague medicine arrives disguised as carpentry and common sense. Communal kitchens keep bellies from writing angry letters. Pots the size of baptisms breathe juniper and bay over barley and peas. A nun stirs like a metronome. You pace the queue like a gentle drill sergeant. Hands, thumbs, backs, rinse, then ladle, the rinse song says. Spill buckets stand between quarrels and decisions. Vinegar referees. Laughter condenses on rafters and drips back as cooperation. Blankets are laws you can fold. All goes to elders first, then infants, then bravado, that finally sits down. You teach the quiet tuck so warmth doesn't panic when someone turns. Hot bricks wrapped in cloth sleep at footboards like small reliable saints. Nightcaps become policy. Mittens get promoted to morale. Cold loses the argument when fabric and timing agree. Markets shrink to winter geometry. You help them breathe without boasting. Stalls rotate away from wind. Smoke learns exit routes. It can remember sleepy. Fish retreats. Roots and loaves take center stage like modest heroes. A rosemary sprig near the scales teaches air to keep its voice down. You find only yesterday and praise today loudly enough to carry. Boredom, the right kind, settles like snow that knows its place. Night shelters learn the math of bodies and blankets. Pallets pull off damp walls. Aisles hold the draft like a leash. Opal sachets, rue, wormwood, lavender, hang where breath cues. Oilustaya. A spoon bell marks turns for coals. Ashpans stop being philosophers. You assign, lantern watch, to the least sleepy and pay in bread. Discipline arrives, dressed as comfort, and nobody argues. When the city finally quiets, you can still hear it. The soft tap of a cane fading down a corridor, the candle that learned to stand in a patient draught, the ledger closing like a careful prayer. Our plague doctor doesn't triumph. They tend. Not heroics, habits. Not miracles, manners. It turns out survival was choreography. Windows cracked by finger widths, linens boiled on time, a spoon bell that kept panic from giving speeches. So what lingers with you? The vinegar tang at the door, the rosemary threading a room back together, or the way a single quiet rule could talk a crowd off a ledge. Which ritual would you borrow for your own life? The quiet tuck, the rinse song, the map that teaches air to behave. If you wore the beak for 1 hour, what sound would steady you most? The watch bell, the brazier's hum, or the hush after a good instruction lands? History rarely shouts what matters. It repeats it. Hang the poster. Move the bed. Boil the cloth. Praise what you want to multiply. Matters. Hilmi gamon egg shorton. Nul the training. I'm old school. Or so young more stray. Wine. In a world that still wrestles with fear and rumour, maybe the bravest thing is to practice small mercies until they look like nature. Kindness scaled to rooms, to streets, to cities that remember how to breathe together. If this journey slowed your pulse and sharpened your gratitude for modern medicine and ordinary order, stay with us. Tap subscribe and turn on notifications so the next quiet deep dive finds you right on time. And if you felt a moment that changed how you'll picture the past, share it below. What image, what scent, what sentence stuck? Your perspective might be the thread that helps someone else's mind unclench. Sleep well. Let the windows in your thoughts crack just a finger width, enough for the stale air to leave and the steady air to arrive. Tomorrow you can carry the ledger again. Tonight you can put it down.